In today's video, I'm going to talk a little bit about boundaries, because with my new influx of followers, I'm having a new influx of people contacting me for discovery calls and to work with me, and it's coming up a lot. And so I'm going to talk about boundaries, but I'm also going to talk about the boundaries in the context of having a life that you desire and deserve by setting them. Okay? I'm going to link, if I can find it, I'm going to link another video that I've made about boundaries, as well as a blog post I believe I've written about it, because it's a very important topic and it's a big way of how I manage my life, every aspect of my life now, with the life that I've created for myself abroad and as an entrepreneur. But I think it's a very important thing for all of us to institute as employees, especially Black women who have a tendency to allow people to overwork them and take advantage of them. And I've really taught myself to not be one of those Black women. And even when you go into self-employment, if you don't release some of the habits that you're taught by the system, by the hyper-capitalist white supremacy system, that governs how we work in the United States and really globally, you will find yourself falling into the same habits of overworking, trying to help and do everything for everyone else and not carving out time for yourself. And I've learned that that's a big mistake. And when I early on, about a year and a half ago, into my business, I was doing that. And I had to stop and realize that I was basically doing the same things that I was doing before when I was on the plantation, and that now that I was free, we's free now, that I needed to change my mindset about work and to set some boundaries around work-life balance. And what it was that is that I live in a very beautiful town. I don't really say where I live in Mexico. I just say I live in Mexico because I don't think people need to know where I live exactly. And people will ask me, which I think is a very strange thing to ask someone to tell you where they live on the internet, but people will ask and I just don't answer. But I live in Mexico, and I live in a lovely town in Mexico that actually is a tourist destination. And what I realized was that I wasn't actually seeing the place that I lived. That, I traveled a lot and I'd come home and I'd just, be working, and not going outside and taking walks with my dog. I have a little poodle, and not seeing the place that I lived in. And I was like, don't make no sense, because I used to live in Washington, D.C., and I fell into the same thing where I was living in a city that millions of people come to visit, but had never, really spent time in the capital. And so I ended up doing a staycation one year with my son, who was not an adult yet. And we went all around the Capitol and had a ball together. Went and saw the MLK monument, went and saw the Lincoln Memorial. And he had seen some of these places on school trips, but he'd never seen them with me, even though we lived not even a good 15-minute drive into downtown. And I really vowed after that I would really make time to do things that were fun just for the sake of doing them. And that I didn't have to always go away, even though we did continue to go away for most spring breaks. But that was a really great, and it's a great memory that he and I have still, even though he's an adult now. And I make the point to say that it's very important to be intentional about setting boundaries and making yourself a priority in your own life. And a lot of us don't do that, especially Black women. We're so busy making everyone else around us a priority that we forget all about ourselves, right? And there's no work-life balance in not carving out time for yourself. So even in the work that I do as an HR consultant, I'm very conscious of that. And I'll give an example, very recent example. So I recently withdrew an offer of engagement to a person who wanted to work with me on a very sensitive employment issue. And they're going through it in their job. They're in a very pivotal period. But I met with the person through a discovery call. They explained the situation to me. And it was very clear what was happening in their workplace, and I explained to them what was happening and what was likely coming. And I offered to work with them, and I sent a communication, which is what I do after discovery call. If I think that I can be helpful to someone, I send an email, I lay out my fee schedule, what it costs to work with me, and I offer them an engagement with me. And I always tell people in that communication that I only take a limited number of people. So that means every person that comes to me and wants to work with me doesn't get an offer of engagement, right? Because I have a schedule, I have a block of time every 3 months that I, slot people in to work with them. Because as I've explained, I have a whole other business that I'm running also, right? So I take a certain number of people. I often really recommend that a lot of people watch my master course and follow the steps in my master course, because they will get the same outcome if they follow the steps. And for some people, that is not the best option, because their situations are kind of complicated, or they're at a certain point where termination might be imminent, right? Even when they're not on a PIP, there's certain things that might be happening that tells me, because I worked in HR for 20 something years, that termination is right around the corner for them. So I will offer them to work with me one-on-one so that we can get in front of what is going on, because most people wait until stuff is real bad in their workplace before they come to me, and that's fine, but that's how it happens. Most people are not strategic. They're reacting to something. That's why they are setting the discovery call in the first place. So I offered this person engagement because it was very obvious to me that really bad things were coming, and they were going to be coming soon. I laid out my fee schedule and everything. The person did not respond for almost 2 weeks. They didn't respond, which is fine. But when they did respond, they responded because something had happened in their job that made it very clear that, again, the employer was moving forward. Even if you don't move, they're moving in the background always, right? When certain things happen in your workplace, like you get called into a meeting with your boss in HR, you get put on a PIP, when these kinds and things are said about your performance and so on, these are signals that they are preparing to create the narrative they need in order to justify terminating you from your job, right? The narrative and the paper trail, because the PIP is nothing. Performance improvement plan is nothing but a paper trail for your employer to justify a for-cause grounds for termination, so that you can't say it was discriminatory or wrongful, because they will say it was about your performance. It was for cause. Okay? That's why they like to use the PIP. It allows them to create the narrative and the paper trail needed to justify firing you. So if you believe that the real reason is because of racial bias or gender bias or age or any combination of protected characteristics, you got to act, and you got to act swiftly, right? That's why it's always, once you see the signs, it's better to go and get advice and assistance and start planning your own strategy, because once it gets to PIPs and meetings and people very obviously trying to push you out of your job, you don't have the same window of time to act. So this person waited 2 weeks to respond to me. And when they did respond, it was because they had been called into a meeting, right, with management and HR. And I explained to them that, and they wanted to engage with me right away. They wanted, now they want an agreement, and they want to let you know. And I said, no. I said, no. I said, let's have you go ahead and have the meeting. And I gave them advice about how to conduct themselves in the meeting. And then I told them, after the meeting, when we have a better idea of what the intentions of your employer are, then we can decide whether me working with you still makes sense. I said, because you could go into that meeting and they could just fire you. And then my advice would be to talk to an attorney, right? So let's see what they do. And then we have a conversation, right? Now, lots of people probably, I guess, in my place would have went forward with the engagement and took the person's money. But I don't do this for money. I want to be very clear about that. Do I have rates that reflect my understanding of the value of my time? Yes, I do. But I don't do this for money. If I did this for money, my rates would be higher, and I take anybody that came to me, and I don't. So this is not about money for me. So I was like, no, I don't think that engagement is appropriate this time. Let's take the time to understand what is going on here so that you respond appropriately. So the employee comes back to me after the meeting and tells me what happened in the meeting, which indicated to me that the employer was trying to get rid of them, but also understood, because now HR had become involved. HR was in the meeting, with this particular meeting. HR had become involved. The management now understood that they had made some missteps that could get them into some trouble. And so the outcome of the meeting indicated to me that this person had a short window, but a window to act and get a lot of what it is that they wanted out of their employer. So I told the person I would be happy to work with them to help them do that, and that I was going to send them an engagement for us to start working together. And in the engagement, I explained to them that they were not my client until they sign the agreement and pay me. I do not work for free. So I sent the person an engagement agreement, and I gave them a time to respond and remit payment because they had contacted me on a Thursday. I don't work on the weekend as a general matter. I might do some prep work for any meetings and clients I have the following Monday, but I make sure I carve out at least a full day where I don't do any work. That's like a hard boundary for me. So when I make an offer to a person for engagement, it's usually between the days of Monday through Thursday. I will usually give a person about a day, 8 hours or so, to respond to the offer, usually because I have other people who also want to work with me, and I have to figure out how to slot all these people in, as well as my regular schedule of work that I have and discovery calls that I have to do and things that I have to do for my other business. So I have to manage my time in a certain way. So I will give people a certain amount of time, and I always let them know that they're not engaged as a client until they have signed and they have paid. And then they get I offer a time slot for our first meeting, but the time is not scheduled until they have actually signed the agreement first and foremost, and then submitted payment, right? So I offered a time slot to this person, and I gave them a time to respond by. Meanwhile, I had another person that also had asked to work with me and also had an emergent situation. And they're almost always emergent situations because people wait until they're either fired or the employer threatens to fire them or puts them on a PIP or something like that. And then they want me to, help them, right? That's just how it is. People wait until things have gotten to a point that's really problematic for them, often before they will come back to me and say, I need help. And sometimes I will help them. And sometimes the situation is such that it doesn't make sense for me to get involved. And so I will give them a lawyer referral if I have one, and they will have to work it out, especially if they have already been told that they're being terminated. And this person wasn't quite there, but they were kind of at the door of this, right? But there was a little space to push back and actually get what it is that they want, right? So, the time that I gave them, I told them they needed to respond by a certain time in order for me to be able to give them the time slot they were asking for. Because I had another person who I also needed to schedule. And this person had actually signed their agreement and paid me, right? And so I told them I need a response by this time in order to be able to give you the time slot that you need. And the next week for me on my schedule was already pretty tight. So the time I offered them was the only time left on my schedule for the whole week. Person didn't respond. They didn't come back and say, I have a question. I don't understand something in the agreement. Can I get more time? Nothing. They just didn't answer. They didn't answer. So that evening, long past the deadline I gave them, I withdrew the offer of engagement because I gave the time slot that they didn't answer about to the person who needed it, who actually did sign the agreement and submit payment timely. Because what I have learned is that how you start things is how you finish. And this is a person who had already shown me non-responsiveness from the initial offer, and that they were going to do stuff at the last minute, which is not a great way to be successful, is if you're reacting to everything in an emergency state, or you're creating emergency states by not answering timely. So I made a decision to withdraw the offer, and that's what I did. And because I didn't have any more time left on my schedule, and the situation that they were in required action that week, it was not something I felt could wait. From my perspective, I thought it would be irresponsible for me to tell them to wait a week to work with me, right? And because the situation they were in, it was very clear to me that if they didn't act promptly, that something problematic was coming, right? And so that they needed to respond to the latest action from the employer, but that they needed to respond timely, and which is why I had offered the time slot that I had, which was the only one I had left, and I had actually kind of moved some things around in order to fit them in. Now, considering that if they had responded to my initial offer of engagement, they would have already been on my schedule, but they didn't, because they waited until the last minute to come back to me when things were bad, right? And so I made a decision to not work with them, because a decision to work with me is also about my decision to work with you. It's not one-sided, because I'm not chasing money here. I'm trying to help you solve a problem that you have. And so if you show me that you're not serious, or also that you don't respect boundaries, I'm not going to work with you, because I don't need those kinds of headaches. Right? And so when I see the signs, and there are times when I've missed the signs, but most of the time I don't, because I pay attention of how people behave and interact, not just in discovery calls, but after. Right? And I don't expect every person that I give an offer to accept it, because my time costs what it costs. Everyone can't afford it. And even those who can don't necessarily, prioritize the situation they are in enough to make the investment. And that's people's choice. They have a right to decide how they're going to spend their money. Right? But I always, as one client said to me that worked with me, she said, she made the calculation that spending the money that she was going to spend to pay me made sense to her, because at the end of it, she walked away with 6 figures after working with me. And the investment she made with me to get to the 6 figures was actually not even 5% of what she got. And so she was like, she didn't know how much she was going to get, but she figured if she was successful, it was going to be significant. And it was. And so it made sense to her to make the investment, because unlike attorneys, I don't take a cut of anything that people get from their employer. Whatever I help them get, they walk away with. They pay the fee to me up front, and then whatever they get is theirs. So she made that calculation, and she decided. Other people make other calculations, and that's okay. But it's very important, regardless of the decisions that other people make, to know your value. And I'm specifically talking to Black women, especially here. It's important for you to know your value. Don't let other people tell you what your value is. Don't let them tell you the value of your time. Don't let them tell you the value of anything else. You have to decide what that is pretty early on, and you stick to it no matter what other people say. And if you're able to do that, it will help you avoid a lot of problems. And it'll help you better navigate the problems that come, because life is problems, no matter whether it's work or personal, whatever. But how you value yourself and your time sets boundaries for other people. And so it's very important to have boundaries that you set, that hard, bright red lines is what I call them, around what you will tolerate and you will not. And one thing I will not tolerate is people disrespecting my time. So if I say I need a response by such and such a time and you don't provide it, then I'm not obligated to do the thing that you want me to do either, because my time has value and there are other people who need my time. And I remember watching a video once about Debbie Allen was talking, and she was talking about how she thinks about money. And she said, the way she thinks about money is that money comes and it goes. And as long as you have your mental capacity and you know how to do what you do well, and Debbie Allen is a pro at what she does, you can always make money. And so she said, I don't chase money and I don't really think about money in calculating the things that I want to do and the things that I don't want to do. And that really stuck with me. And that's kind of how I think about my life and what I do, is that yes, you should be responsible, and money is important because it gives us the options to do the things that we want to do. But it shouldn't be the first thing that you think about. It shouldn't be first and foremost. And when you get to a place where you understand your value, it won't become a thing, because money will always come. If you have the knowledge, the skills, and the training, and you understand and respect the knowledge and the skills and the training that you have, it's not about other people respecting it. It's about you respecting it. Then you will set boundaries that people will respect or they won't respect. And if they don't respect them, then they don't get to be in your life and they don't get to interact with you at the level of those who do. And so for me, I pay very close attention to how people treat my requests for responses and timelines, even before they become my clients, because I find the people who don't are the people who end up not having a level of success that they could have in engagements, because they don't respond to things timely. They don't meet deadlines, right? And that might be an indication of why you have trouble at your job, right? You have to respect yourself and have boundaries for yourself in order to have success in your career or anywhere else in your life. And if you don't, you're going to have problems. And I don't need no problems. So if I see signs that someone is a problem, I'm not going to deal with them, because I don't need problems. I'm setting my life to minimize problems, especially problematic people. You can't avoid problems in every problem, because life, comes with problems. But you do have a lot of control over how many problematic people you have to interact with. And I'm very, 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 very conscious of avoiding dealing with people who are problematic. And so I have found that I've had as many successful engagements I have had with clients where they have gotten the outcomes that they seek, because I try to be careful about picking my clients. Now, sometimes I'm not successful. Sometimes I have had some very, some difficult ones, right? And people who want the outcome but don't want to do the work, who don't follow your instructions when you give it to them, because I don't, I give people advice and I coach them and I educate them and I help them to communicate effectively with their employers and to ask for the things that they want from their employers. But I don't go to the meetings with you. I have absolutely nothing to do with your employer. I work with you for you to be able to learn certain skills so that you can get the outcomes that you want from your employer without me ever getting involved. Your employer should never even know that I exist, right? They just know that all of a sudden this employee is asking questions they ain't never heard them ask before, right? And very clearly and directly asking for things that they've never asked for before. And I'm teaching people skills that I want them to carry from one job to the next. Ideally, a person works with me, they never have to work with me again, because when they're done, they know what to do the next time an employer tries to act up with them. They know exactly what to do. One of my best and favorite stories and favorite clients was a client who came to me. It's always a difficult work situation. Worked with the client, helped her get the outcome that she wanted. And she ended up sending someone else to me who turned out to be her boyfriend. And when it was time for me to do the discovery call with her boyfriend, she got on the call and told me that her boyfriend no longer needed to have the discovery call with me, because she decided to just simply teach him what I had taught her. And he had had a meeting with his employer the day before and asked for separation and got it. And he was now negotiating his separation agreement. And because I had taught her how to negotiate a separation agreement, she was helping him with that too. I was so proud. I can't even tell you how proud I was. I was so proud. I didn't feel like, oh, you should have had him come. No, I was so happy to hear her say that. And I told her how proud I was of her, because she had now gone into a new job. She was really happy in what she was doing. She worked in the entertainment industry, which can be a very difficult industry to work in, but she was really happy and doing really, really well. She had left tech. Let me tell you, the tech sector is rough on women, and especially Black women. Hell. But she had gotten out of there with my help, and now she was doing the damn thing, and she was really happy, and she was able to help her significant other, who had also was working in tech to realize the same success by simply teaching him what I had taught her. And that's what it's about for me. But one thing I'm not going to do is deal with anybody that does not respect my time and does not, and indicates to me that they don't have any boundaries, right? And, everyone comes to me at a time when there's distress in their lives and because of the situation in their workplace. And I know what that feels like, right? And some of it is very hard for me to hear and deal with because it reminds me of everything that ever happened to me at work. Every single time, every client, every discovery call, right? But what I'm not going to do is deal with someone that demonstrates to me that they're not going to respect the timelines and the boundaries and so on that I set, because it's just going to be problematic from start to finish. So I'm very conscious of paying attention to these things. And really, I'm not a pick me person. There are a lot of people who pick me, pick meshas is what I call them. So my thing is, you're making a decision to work with me. I'm also making a decision to work with you. And if I don't think it's a good match, I'm not going to work with you. As soon as I see that, I'm not. And even if I offer you an engagement, if I determine that you're not a person that I think I should work with because of things that you do in the interim, I'm going to withdraw the engagement. And I reserve the right to do that for any reason or no reason up until a person actually signs an engagement agreement with me. Right? So I try to be really transparent about my process, because I don't want anybody to come work with me if they don't think that they can. I'm exactly the same all the time. That's one of the things about being a free person, that a lot of us can't be in our workplaces, is I don't have to be I'm not a different person on camera than a different person. When people meet me, I'm exactly the same. I'm very straightforward. I'm direct. I don't, candy coat things. And in these situations, there's no time for that, right? People need guidance. They need advice. But I'm not a person who's going to coddle you or try to paint pretty pictures of things. I'm very direct and straightforward with people. And I'm not for everyone. And that's okay. None of us are for everyone. One of the best things you can do in life is find your own people and find your tribe, whether you're your family, your workplace, whatever it is finding your tribe and also being your own tribe, right? So it's very important to have boundaries, ladies, especially the ladies. I don't find that men have as many problems with setting boundaries as women do. They don't necessarily value their family and being at home in the way that they should. Some of them, not all of them, but when they do, they set boundaries around that stuff, right? I think women have a harder time because we are socialized to believe that we are here to be in service, the workhorse for everyone else around us, right? And I am really encouraging us to stop doing that. And I'm very careful in my own life and in my work to not be that person, to very much be aware and conscious of my value and the value of my time, and to be very intentional about how I spend my time, including with whom I spend my time in work and personally. And I think it's important for all of us to do that and to set really hard lines around those things so that we can have the experiences that we want to have. And, to me, this is not just about how I set boundaries about selecting clients and so on. It's also for me a lesson that you can carry into how you select your next job, how you select your employer, because that's what I did later in my career. I walked away from offers. I remember being in an interview. It was a company. They wanted to move me. They were willing to move me to the West Coast, and had a couple rounds of interviews. And then somebody said something in an interview that didn't sit right with me. And I thought about it for a while, and then I sent them a very nice email and withdrew my interest, right? Because I was just like, I don't think this is going to be a good situation for me. And so I withdrew my interest. And I've had that happen more than once. I remember someone asking me to do, and this was for the executive role, someone asking me to do a writing test. And I said no. And I simply said no. At my level, I don't do writing tests. If you don't think I can write, then you shouldn't even be talking to me. But what I'm not going to do is sit there. And what they were doing, and a lot of employers do, is they'll give you a problem that they're having at their company and put it under the guise of a writing test and ask you to solve the problem. And then they might even go hire somebody else, but they'll take the solution you gave them in your interview and implement it, and you will get no credit. I don't play those kinds of games. I'm not jumping through hoops and writing essays for anybody at this point in my life. And that's what I told them. I've been doing this for 15 years at that point. I don't do tests. I don't write essays. Get somebody else to do it. I don't think this is a good fit. Thank you for your interest in me. God bless and good luck. And I walked away. And I'm glad I did. Right? But because I was like, no, I'm not going to read this essay and write a solution for you and tell you how to solve this problem. If you want me to solve this problem for you, you pay me to do it. You hire me and you pay me to do it. But what I'm not going to do is write an essay. No, I'm not doing that. And I don't think anyone should do that. But I hear it's all the rage in tech and some other sectors that that's what part of their employment, their interview process. But I was like, I'm not participating in this. So I said no, and I walked away, and I found a fit that was the right fit for me. So I think that it's important to have boundaries and to understand the value of what you know and what you do before anyone else does. Other people don't need to get it right away, but you need to. You need to understand your own worth. And so this is a life lesson that I have learned, and it's a life lesson that I hope more of us will learn, and sooner than I learned it. Because I didn't get to this till I was in my 40s. And I really want a lot of us younger, our younger sisters to learn this earlier so that you can avoid some of the, potholes that some of us run into and stay in for a really long time. But at this point in my life, I am very, very serious about protecting my peace and having boundaries about my work as well as about my personal life. And so there are certain things I'm just not going to deal with in my professional life or in my personal life. Get somebody else to do it because I'm not the one or the two. I ain't doing it. So the minute you show me that you're not going to respect my time, I'm not going to mess with you because that means you're less likely to do the things that I tell you to do in the way that I tell you to do them. And then you're not going to get the outcome that you want. And then you're going to say it's my fault. And that's what I seek to avoid. So I want people to be successful, and everyone isn't going to be successful even when they do everything I tell them to do, because the wild card is always what your employer is going to do. And most of them behave in a certain way, but some of them don't, right? Some of them aren't smart enough to. Some of them won't respond until an attorney sends them a letter. And even then, they'll act wild, right? Some of them have to be dragged into court, but most of them, I would say 85% of them, they don't want no part of that. They want to just deal with these problems, resolve them, get a separation agreement in place that protects them. That's what the separation agreements are. They're about protecting and limiting an employer's risk. And that's why they're willing to sign them, because if you can show them that they've broke the law, right, and that that they have, then they're more likely to want to just pay you to go away rather than taking the risk of you dragging them into court, right? But it's very important for me that when I take people on as clients, I want them to be successful. I want them to get what it is that they want, right? So the big test for me is always, is this a person who's going to be able to follow my instructions and do what I ask them to do and respond timely? And most of the time they are, they're very, very invested as well. But sometimes, every now and again, there's an outlier. There are people who, I recently had someone sign up for an engagement with me, and they came to the first meeting. I gave them some things that I needed them to do, information that I needed them to put together. And since then, nothing. No more responses. Haven't done any work, emailed me. I sent them multiple communications, following up with them. They responded and, gave me basically a dog ate my homework story. And, I reminded them again that I wanted them to be successful, that I wanted them to respond. Crickets. So there every now and again there's someone like that, but most people are serious about these things and want, and I'm sure that person is going to likely come back when again their termination is imminent. Things get to what I call DEFCON 10, and then they want me to drop everything and help them. And most of the time I'm like, I can't do that because I'm actually a very busy person. And so if I can try to fit someone else in because of the situation and they haven't wasted my time already, I will really try to do it. And even in this recent case, I actually was moving like discovery calls around and trying to figure out how to get a time slot on my schedule. So I opened up a slot on my schedule to take this person. And then they didn't respond timely. So when someone else came who was actually serious about moving forward, I gave the slot to that person because the other person didn't answer on it by the time that I asked. And it wasn't because they hadn't, paid or signed immediately. It's because they went radio silent. And I don't play those kinds of games because my thing is it's your responsibility to communicate, right? If you want something, it's your responsibility to say you want it. So even if you need more time, it's on you to say, thanks for sending this to me, but I need some more time. And then I can either say, yes, I can give you more time, or no, I can't for these reasons, right? But when you say nothing, then I get to interpret what that means. And it's not going to be interpreted in the way that you necessarily want it to be interpreted. And I think that's an important lesson for all of us, especially those of you who are still on the plantation, to keep in mind that one, have some boundaries and be very firm about them. Two, know your value. Know your own value. Don't let anybody else tell you what your value is. You know your worth and know your value and be very strong in what you know. Right? And pay attention to the signs in your work environment, and especially when you're selecting an employer, because you are making a choice. I remember saying that a lot when I used to oversee HR and I used to oversee recruitment. And I used to tell my recruiters all the time, when you're interviewing someone, you're not just making a choice about whether you think this person is a good fit. They're making a choice about whether we're a good fit for them. And we need to be, we need to take that into consideration and not be arrogant, right? In thinking, oh, well, we're the only ones that are making a decision. Both parties are making a decision on both sides about whether the fit is right. And so it's important that both parties feel good about working together. And so when you are going into these job interview situations, and I'm going to be talking more in the future about it because it's very clear to me there's a lot of things people are missing when it comes to picking an employer, which is how you end up in a lot of these hostile work environments, is you don't see the signs. And the signs are often there. Not always, but often. Right? And I think about every job I was ever in, the signs were there. And I will share some of those signs with you all in the future. The signs were always there. Of the most toxic places, the signs were always there. So you got to pay attention to the signs and realize that they're not just making a decision to pick you. You're making a decision to pick them. Choose wisely. Pay attention to any red flags that come up and take them seriously. I always tell people the best time to look for a job is when you have a job. Don't wait till things get bad and you get desperate. Always be looking for a job. Always be in the mode to leave. After my first really bad experience, that's one thing I never forgot. And even when I was making a very large amount of money, I would send my resume around to headhunters, and I would just go to interviews for the fun of it. Even if I knew I wasn't really looking, I went to interviews where I knew I wasn't taking a job, just because I always wanted to know that I was employable. Now I'm unemployable, as my shirt says. I have no interest in being employed by anybody. But I also felt interviewing is good practice. Interviewing. I used to go at least once or twice a year. I would, go to interviews for jobs. And then, if they got really serious, sometimes I'd be like, I'm not interested. But if a good offer, because I was always like, if a really good offer comes, I might leave. Right. But I would interview because One, it kept me in practice of knowing what kind of questions people were asking and what was out there, right? And two, I was always in the mindset of if stuff goes sideways, I'll leave. I'm not staying, I was never going to be somebody after my first experience that stayed anywhere for 30 years or 40 years. No way. 3 to 5 at the most, because I was at executive level. If you're not at executive level, I think 3 years, as I said before, is the longest you should stay in any job. But you should always go into an interview with the mindset that this is not just about whether they want to hire you. It's about whether you want to be hired by them. It's a two-way street. And if more of us went in with that mindset, our outcomes would be different. Don't go in there feeling like, oh, pick me, pick me. No, they need to be pick me as well. And if they are coming in there and treating you like they're doing you a favor, you need to pay attention to that. It's a mutual, working is a mutual agreement. It's a social contract, and it's an agreement that you're going to do something and someone is going to pay you to do that thing. And they're going to pay you to do that thing because they think you're the best person and you have demonstrated that you have the knowledge, skills, and ability to do it, or that you are a person that they can teach what they need to teach in order to do it if you're an entry-level position, right? And it always comes down to that. If it's entry level, one of the biggest questions is the person teachable? Is this someone that can learn to do this job? They might have some gaps. They may have no experience at all, but are they teachable? When you get into the middle and above, it's about, does this person have enough of the knowledge, skills, and abilities that we need in order to get this work done? And are they employable? Are they someone that is going to fit in with the team and these other things, right? But the key thing is always, can they do the work, right? And then for you, it needs to be, if you know you can do the work, then that's not the issue. The issue is, are these people I want to do this work with? That's the question for you is, I know I have the knowledge, skills, and abilities. Are these the people I want to do it with? And too many of us get caught up in how much we're going to be paid. And we don't ask those questions, right? And like I said, the money is always going to come. And if you don't believe that, it's because you have a scarcity mindset. And I don't know what to tell you about that, because I know for a fact there's always going to be another job. Even if you have to move to another place that has more jobs, there's always an opportunity to get another job. And you're not a tree, you can move. But if money is the only thing you think about when you're looking for a job, you're going to end up in some bad situations. You have to do other analyses of why you take a job and why you are going to go to work somewhere besides the money. Does the money matter? Yes, but it's not the only thing that matters. And too many of us only think about the money and the title that we're going to have. And we don't pay enough attention to the cues in the interviews. And we don't ask no questions. You should always ask questions, but a lot of times people don't ask questions. They just nod, smile, give the right answer to the questions they're asked, but they don't really engage in, investigation of what kind of people. They're not going online. They're not going on Glassdoor and other places to see what other people have to say about the job, which would save a lot of people a lot of heartache if they did that. And I'm pretty sure I did a video about why it's important, about checking on, knowing more about your employer before you work for them. I'll have to check and see if that one's on this channel or whether it was on my old channel. But if it is, I'll link it. But it's very important for you to have a different mindset, for us to have a different mindset about working with people, whether it's doing it as a contractor, consultant, because I have friends who are consultants who run the same kind of problems because they're chasing the money. And I'm like, that's the wrong way to do about it. You have to be selective about your clients as well. Just the way they're selecting you, you have to be selective about them. And it's doubly important when you're an employee. So you should be going into these interviews and you should be asking questions about work-life balance. You should be asking questions about how people work together. You should be asking questions and asking for examples, asking concrete questions and telling them these things are very important to me and I'm sure they're important to you. I'd like to ask you some questions about work-life balance. And if people get uncomfortable and they look crazy or they give you a crazy answer, you don't want to work with them. If they start hemming and hawing, that means they don't believe in work-life balance. Don't work with them if it's important to you. Right? So I think it's very important to, prioritize boundaries and understand your own worth and value if you want people to respect those things. And so I hope this video was helpful in sharing my perspective about the importance of valuing yourself and having boundaries, and the life lessons that I have learned around that I now institute in my own work and in my own life. I hope this is helpful to those of you who've probably not thought about it in this way, and even those of you who do. And if you are someone who institutes these kinds of rules in your life, I'd love you to share comments, because I know this is not something that we as Black people, especially Black women, have been socialized to do. So we have to actually teach ourselves to do it, and we have to be intentional about it, because we live in a world that actually tells us we shouldn't value ourselves, and we should take whatever we're given, and we should not have any boundaries. And so deciding that you are going to set boundaries and that you are going to value yourself is a revolutionary act. Be revolutionary. I hope this video was helpful. Remember, HR is not your enemy, but they're definitely not your friend. But I am. I'm Anne Marie, the anti-HR lady, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.